Yeah, yeah. I just hit record, and I feel
Okay.
like we're on to something already, and we just started. Uh, I do have introduction, so I don't know if you want to have like a quick introduction yourself and Solari report. Am I
So,
pronouncing that correctly?
yeah. So, my name is Catherine Austin Fitz. I published this Larry report, and I'm delighted to be here talking to you about all things freedom and money. So, I confess, I spent my whole life in money, but I confess what I'm really interested in is freedom. So, it's I grew up being taught that money was one of the great power tools, but it was really, it was what you use to build your future to control things, but it was only as a tool that it was of any interest to me. So,
Yeah, it's definitely turned into dystopian outlook compared to sound money, right? It's not what we have. So you're talking about the executive order. What are your thoughts on the executive order?
so I've been tracking all the different proposals for getting taxpayers to fund purchases of crypto. And, it started for me in 2017. I saw a trial balloon at the Aspen Institute. And already then I was really focused on how crypto was being very strategically used by the bankers to keep the retail market away from real assets, including gold and land. So, the smart money was buying gold and land, but the interest was in trying to get a whole world of people out of gold and land and real assets and into crypto for a variety of reasons. And I think one is, if you want to build an all digital monetary system and use it to control, you want to get the smartest people prototyping your products for you, and you're never going to hire them. You're never going to get them to work for you. So it's much easier to get them to do it, if they think they're creating things. So anyway, so the first one I saw was in 2017, but then we saw several at Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville. So RFK had a proposal and the president had a proposal as well. And then we've seen different things floated. So a week ago, or just this weekend, I guess the president put out a tweet proposing a digital reserve with Solano, ADA, and XRP, and then followed it up with another tweet suggesting Ethereum and Bitcoin. And there was real anger about potential insider trading on those tweets. So, because it was clearly affecting the prices. Anyway, so then he just signed, was it today or yesterday? Yesterday, an executive order for a strategic Bitcoin reserve and U.S. digital asset stockpile. And what they're proposing is two things. One is to move any digital assets that have been acquired by forfeiture, by both criminal and civil money forfeiture at the Department of Justice, and move them over to Treasury and not sell them. So if you're trying to pump the market, obviously taking that stockpile off the market, protects market prices. So that's helpful to the sort of pump. But the second thing is, it is proposing that they can add to it with more civil and criminal money penalties now, and fines. So the federal government could charge or do civil money penalties as well as forfeitures. Now, I don't know how much you know, if anything, about the history of civil money forfeiture and the asset forfeiture fund in the Department of Justice, but there has been decades of serious complaints about the federal government seizing assets without any basis. And looking at this and knowing what I know about civil and criminal money forfeiture and asset seizures, I would immediately sell all my crypto if I wanted to keep doing what I do, which is talking about freedom and fighting for freedom. Because I think the misuse of how this could be used, particularly if you combine it with an AI driven social credit system, is very frightening and dangerous. So I would just, if you have big positions in crypto and you're playing fast and loose with law and regulation in any aspect of your life, then you're now a target. So I would just be very, very careful about that. So that's number one. But number two, they're also proposing that the Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, and Bessent, Secretary of Treasury, come up with proposals to build the digital assets by revenue neutral tactics. Now, what is a revenue neutral tactic? If what I've said is I think what they're looking to do is to pump the price of Bitcoin so they can swap it for land. So if I'm the whales and I'm a small percentage of the Bitcoin owners, but I have, what would you say, 60 to 70% of the outstanding Bitcoin?
So I'm not sure, honestly. I think like just even one Bitcoin, you're in the top 1% of holders, just having one Bitcoin.
But you have a very very high concentration of ownership in a small number of hands.
Sure, that's what
Right.
I
Right.
mean.
So you have whales. There's no way for the whales to get out. But if they can swap for land, if they can swap the federal government, because we know Howard Lutnick has been very aggressive about talking about the fact that the U.S. balance sheet has $500 trillion worth of land and mineral resources. If you can use government purchases to run the value of Bitcoin up and swap it for the land, in theory, I think what these guys are going to do is propose that is revenue neutral. If you're 63% of Utah is federal land, it's even more. I think it's 67% in Idaho. And that's very beautiful, very valuable land. If you can run the price of Bitcoin up and swap it and say it's revenue neutral, you can basically swap nothing for something and get that land for free. It's a land grab.
Well, also, did you look at the recent Ukraine mineral rare earths that was part of kind of getting funding for Zelensky to get funding? Trump proposed that we get the rights to the rare earths that get pumped out of the ground next. I mean, that's what powers AI and everything that this whole technological revolution that we're looking at is going to be powered by rare earths.
Right, but I didn't read the agreement, and the reason I didn't read the agreement is Bloomberg and several other sources had articles saying it wasn't true. They just didn't have that. You didn't have that value of rare earth minerals in Ukraine. I think there's very valuable farmland and very valuable resources in the Ukraine, but not rare earth. So I'm not, based on those sources, I'm not clear what's really there. I don't know how much of that was legitimate and how much of that was just show and tell.
It goes to your point though, is that I think what Lutnick they're trying to tokenize all natural resources before they even refine them or take them out of the ground and then use it as leverage. So Ukraine's
their goal is to
right. But I'm saying they pump it before you need to tokenize it before you can take it, right? Or securitize it. They need to have some way to buy it, right? If you have just the land rights, right? Like there needs to be land rights. There needs to be some way for them to swap Bitcoin for whatever asset that they want. Right. So if it's tokenized, they can make the transaction happen instantaneously. So I just found it ironic. Excuse me. I just found it ironic that at the same time you're mentioning this, that's the next plan for Ukraine is to start not tokenizing, but rare earths and buy the rights to the minerals.
Well, here's our challenge, because when you talk about, so let's talk about Bitcoin or crypto or sort of any of these different technologies. These are just tools, and so one conversation is, what are the tools? How do we use them? What can they do for us? On the other hand, part of this conversation is we got a group of grifters who are looking to take everything and use these different technologies to manipulate and take. And I don't know about you, it comes down to what you're interested in. And I'm interested in being free. And I'm not interested in seeing a small handful of people take all the assets and control them. And so the question for us is, okay, how do we how do we, because you got a lot of really wonderful people who love crypto and think they're great tools and could be great tools. And they're right, they could be great tools. But if you look at where this is headed, it's headed to someplace very, very, very dark. And how do we turn it around? That's the question. I mean, I would love to see. I don't, I always fantasize movie plots, but to me, the great plot is the crypto community get together and figure out how to pull the rug out from under the grifters. That would be beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, well, like you were saying, there's been insiders trading pretty much every tweet that the president puts out. There's somebody that's making millions and millions of dollars.
It sure looks that way. I mean, it
Well,
just
it's right in our fases. It's like they're
right.
not even trying to hide it anymore. At least 10 years back, they at least tried to hide it a little bit. It seems like they're not even bothering at this point. I mean, I don't know. It's
So I was just going to show you something. So you know how I'm always talking about 21 trillion missing from the US government between 1998 and 2015? So if you go to our missing money website, we will show you at the different agencies where the money went missing how much it was in each year. And if you just look at each one of those years from 98 to 2015, every year Howard Lutnick's firm was a primary dealer financing the government deficit, taking the treasury bonds, selling the bonds to pension funds and sovereign wealth funds, and putting the money over in treasury where, it got spent to do the government deficit as it is today. So Howard Lutnick got rich from 1998 to 2015, basically borrowing money from our pension and retirement funds so they could disappear out the back door. And he never once mentioned, to the investors in the market that I know of or saw, that they were financing money that was disappearing out the back door, which meant the credit of the U.S. that they were getting was being drained, as this game went on. He didn't say a word, right? So now that he's become a billionaire, financing the 21 trillion missing, disappearing out of the back door. Now the question is, what else is there to take? Well, now that you've drained the 21 trillion, and I should point out the Trump administration took the books dark in 2018 with FASB 56, but now that you've taken the books dark and you don't have to report how much is missing, now what's left to take? Well, you can take the data, right? I mean, if you look at the data that Doge is getting access to, that's some of the most valuable data in the world and could certainly make an AI very valuable. But then the last thing is the land and mineral resources.
It seems like we've lost quite a few people. You're saying how can we prevent this? And it almost seems like we had a larger group of people, and they're just obsessed with this administration being a good guy or the good guys that they lost sight of the big picture. And we talked about this the last time I came on your show about CBDCs are swapped out with stable coins. And I've noticed this trend of people just, turning a blind eye because it aligns with their philosophies, their political philosophies. What are your thoughts on, the whole kind of putting Elon Musk and Trump doing everything that's like anti-woke, kind of resonates with the crowd and having the crowd kind of resonating with a group of people?
So if you look at the president, the president spoke to Congress on Tuesday night. And if you look at, he started off and listed all the sort of great things he's done. And those are all things that I think his base would all love. So, he canceled participation in the WHO. He canceled participation in the Paris Climate Agreement. He's fighting to stop men being in women's sports, and on and on and on. So those are all the things that sort of the base would love. But then he goes into marketing the control grid as something positive. So, 500 billion for Stargate data centers to, control us all, et cetera, and all the stuff in the control grid. So there's a mixed bag where he's doing a lot of things that many people, including me, love, right? But then he's doing a series of steps to build the control grid. And I think it's really what I've found resonates with people is people who don't want to be controlled in an all digital concentration camp. It's easy to explain the different component parts and then help them see that. Now some people don't want to see it because it's so frightening. So, they're different. One of the real, tricky issues, of course, and you're seeing that at HHS, is the vaccine issue. Because, if I'm right, the vaccine issue is critical to building the Internet of Bodies. And, we're digitizing all life. I don't know what to do with the people who, I've looked at the polls, and the polls indicate that, that Trump's support is not that, to do real change in Washington, we used to be trained that you needed 80% support. It looks to me like Trump has about 50% support and slightly less for Musk. Musk is a lot less popular than Trump. And my expectation, as more facts roll out through through personal networks, as what's really going on in Washington rolls out through sort of networks of trust, I expect that to go down. So I don't think they don't begin to have 80% support. What you do have is you have a group of people who are really appreciative of the cultural changes and want to believe that there's hope. And they're putting their hope in the wrong place, because literally, Darren, if we made you president tomorrow, you would be in a mechanism, a governmental mechanism, which is 100% controlled by the backers. And you would have to do what you're told. So there's no way Trump is doing what Trump wants to do. Trump is doing what he's told. So I think I told you the red button story the last time we talked. So this is a very famous story. I was giving a speech in 2001 to it was 2000 or 2001 to a group of people who have a conference once a year to talk about how to evolve our society spiritually. And and so I'm in the middle of the speech, and I was describing the fact that I don't know if you know the Dark Alliance allegations about drug dealing by the U.S. intelligence agencies into South Central Los Angeles. They were bringing the drugs in through Mena, Arkansas, and it was a joint venture between Clinton as the governor of the state and Bush, who was running the National Security Council. So the Bushes and the Clintons were teamed up running this narcotics traffic, or giving political air cover to this narcotics trafficking operation. Gary Webb wrote a book called Dark Alliance, which is a really good description of the whole affair. But Congress had testimony, a congressional investigation on all of this in 1998. So I was talking with a reporter who had covered the congressional investigation. And during the congressional investigation, the Department of Justice spokesperson had told her that the U.S. economy launders $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all dirty money. So that was fiscal 1998. It's a much bigger number now, but it makes us the global leader in money laundering. So I said to this wonderful group of spiritually evolved people, what would happen if we stopped being the global leader in laundering illegal cash flows? So that's everything. It's narcotics trafficking, it's human trafficking, it's illegal gambling, it's everything. So I said to them, what would happen? And they said, well, we'd have trouble financing the government deficit, and our taxes might go up, and our government checks might stop, and the money that goes into the New York Stock Exchange would leave and go to London or Hong Kong or Singapore. And so our IRAs and 401ks would go down in value. And I said, okay, well, let's pretend there's a big red button up here on the lectern. And if you push that button, you can stop all hard narcotics trafficking in your city, in your county tomorrow. Who here will push the button? And out of 100 people dedicated to evolving our society spiritually, only one would push the button. So I said to the other 99, why would you not push the button? And they said, we don't want our taxes to go up. We don't want our government checks to stop. And we don't want our IRAs and 401ks to go down in value. Okay, now, if you walk into the Oval Office tomorrow, you're the president of the United States, your political guy is going to turn to you and say, okay, Mr. President, the American people just spent billions to get you elected. Now, the crypto industry gave you all this money. Now they want a Bitcoin strategic reserve. They want you to do this. They want you to do that, right? They want you to, appoint a crypto czar at the White House and, do things that make them money. Okay. So you're going to turn to your Secretary of Treasury and you're going to say, okay, well, how do I get the money to do all of this? And they're going to say, well, you bet you can't push the red button, right? Right. Because the American people don't want you to stop laundering. And so here's the magic trick here is you can push the red button if you can turn it green. If you can do it in a way that re-engineers the economy so that we're building productive wealth and not doing organized crime. Because ultimately you can't get wealthy by liquidating your children. That's what Kennedy's trying to say over at HHS, and that's what the whole Medicare Medicaid fight is about, because you can't keep poisoning American and think we're going to get wealthy. And so, but if you look at how you do that, it means what you do in Tulsa is entirely different than what you do in Brooklyn. And you've got to radically decentralize how you're using your money. It's going to be different place to place. So you need radical decentralization to make a real change work. And of course, that means Washington giving up power and states and local governments getting more power. And, in my entire lifetime, the only thing Washington wants is more power, right? So if you look at political contributions, they all come from capital gains on real estate or the stock market, which comes from centralizing more market share into publicly traded stocks. So you centralize and centralize and centralize, and so the political conundrum is, how do we decentralize in a way that creates real wealth, and how do we achieve that politically?
Yeah. Well, I think you nailed the nail on the head when you talked about the local governments, right? We need to create systems that start from the ground up, and then the global governance is almost like a direct democracy of local governments to create something, which this technology can offer. These really complex systems with money tied into it, data tied into it, supply chain, everything can be tied into these extremely nice, neat packages that have the primitives to pretty much do everything that you're talking about. But again, it goes back to the centralized powers that be have kind of taken this and hijacked it. We had a utopian vision set, and it seems to have gone derailed, and nobody seems to care because BlackRock's buying their bags.
So, but let me ask you something. Is it possible to create mesh networks with local crypto systems? So you start with community currencies and you make them local, but you put them on mesh networks, and you have so many people who know how to do, encryption with local systems. I think I told you, Bill Binney once said to me, if we teach all the homeschoolers how to build homegrown encryption systems and we keep changing them, he said it'll drive them crazy. They'll never be able to deal with it. He was referring to the NSA, where he had been the technical director. So, can we create, local community currencies with crypto that are truly private?
Yeah, yeah, that's completely possible. But I would think the largest problem would be getting everybody on board. I think the awareness piece, like you were talking about earlier, is the key to all of this. I don't think without the awareness, it's never going to happen. Or the centralized powers that be kind of make it so horrible that people are forced to pay attention to it. And I think that's kind of what's what's in motion right now. Is,
So you mean the shock and awe?
well, I think they keep going with it into a point where the average Joe actually cares at that point. I would say that the biggest hurdle is people not having the ambition to create local systems, that local governments, local currencies. The ambition's not there, so it needs to get
Right.
so bad that the ambition's there, and that's frightening, right? Because to me, it's already pretty bad right now. So how much worse does it get before it gets better?
So the potential, if you're gonna deglobalize, which is what is happening, the potential for inflation to get much worse is pretty likely. And it's not, people say it's the dollar failing. It's not the dollar failing, it's globalization failing or reversing. So, and certainly tariffs help that accelerate that process. So, whether it's tariffs or simply the reduction in trade and globalization, the deglobalization, the potential for much greater inflation is very significant. So, it is going to. I think if you're looking at a household budget and what's happening to both revenues and expenses, you need to plan on much greater inflation. And it's not just food inflation, it's time inflation. Because the problem is not just that the price of the tuna fish can goes up 25%, but the quality goes down 25%, and there's a chance once a year you get food poisoning, right? And then you lose a week. So it's time inflation too. So I really look like I'm cheering you up a lot.
It's not even just the like you're saying, not even about the quality going down, but then you get sick, you got to go to big pharma and get some type of
No, don't.
cure.
No, I got to tell you, one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life was, I got kicked out of the establishment. I started litigating with the federal government, and I couldn't go to the doctor and hospital. It wasn't safe. I mean, it literally wasn't safe. So I was on my own, and it forced me to learn about and explore every old time recipe. But the other thing is it also got me plugged into networks that would never have trusted me before that, and they taught me a wealth about living outside the system. And so I learned, it was only through that I really broke away from the healthcare system. And what I learned is the safest way, the best way to stay healthy in America is never go see a doctor.
I
So,
agree.
yeah,
I agree 100% with that. I mean, even the doctors that you can agree with, so like the holistic doctors, they get kicked out of the medical establishment, right?
right.
It's the people that genuinely care for your health. Um, they're the ones that are villainized.
Well, I had to spend a lot of time learning about sort of healthcare, but also, I think now there's a wealth of people and sources where you can learn much more about how to be your own doctor and how to take care of yourself. One of the advantages I had living in Tennessee, we have a huge number of really high quality nurse practitioners who, who sort of dovetail or sort of click back and forth between the traditional system and the old timey, natural health systems. And so they offer you the best of both worlds. It was one of the blessings of living in Tennessee.
After so a lot of times when you go to the hospital, they're just following guidelines that the federal government has set out. So that it's not even like the doctors have a choice anymore on what's the best treatment for you. They're just simply following a guideline that they've
Right.
been mandated. And like
Right.
that was the whole Obamacare thing. Everybody thought that was a great idea, but it really took away doctors' freedom to give patients choices and custom care. We don't have that anymore, and a lot of people don't even understand that. But that's what scares me to death too is the trend towards socializing everything. People don't really get economics or free markets, and when you have the government step in, it just turns everything to garbage.
Right. So let me ask you about stable coins, because I was expecting, um, it seems like the focus here is on the land grab and the, pumping on the pump and dump and the land grabbing. And I was expecting the focus to be on stable coins and using stable coins to extend the dollar system. And in fact, I know I saw a headline, Bank of America came out and applied they were going to start to do a stable coin. So I would love to know from you, what are you seeing in the stablecoin world? And is there a push to use stablecoins to extend the dollar, or has that been put on the back burner while Howard Lutnick does a land grab?
No, it has been put on the back burner. So a lot of the bigger banks, they've created stable coin or just tokenized bank deposits. So um, instead of a stable coin, you could have a tokenized bank deposit. So the my Bank of America account's 1/10 of the actual money, right? The fractional reserve lending, and instead they tokenize those under collateralized tokens and call it bank deposits, right?
But wait a minute, if why would I want to go to the bother of having at Bank of America? Why would I want to bother, instead of having a bank deposit, to have a bank token?
Why would you want to? Why? Well, I don't think most people will know the difference, but I would imagine there'd be some type of ecosystem, the Bank of America ecosystem, that you want to keep your money in versus a stable coin that's open to the wide open. But yeah, that's going to be a big problem in competition, right? Because the banks traditionally have had all of the power, and now you're starting to see competition arise. So the banks are going to have to really change their business models, and if they don't, they're just going to get clobbered. So the dollar system is expanding. You're going to see a lot of the countries that have unstable currencies just use stable coins, and you're already
Right,
seeing that. You're seeing that as in Myanmar. Am I pronouncing that right?
right.
Myanmar.
Myanmar.
They're using Tether, ironically, as their currency. Turkey was using USDT as their currency. A lot of countries that have suffered hyperinflation are using stable coins. So you're going to see the
Right,
trend continue. The U.S. government's starting to push out regulations for stable coins, and that's going to be key. Is once they're regulated and you can send
right.
your stable coins to your stock exchange and buy stocks, right? Like that's where it all starts to make sense and work. And this kind of goes against the narrative that you were talking about, though, with Trump and globalization or deglobalization, is that um, this actually strengthens the dollar, and he's looking
Right.
for a weaker dollar to push up asset prices. So I'm really wondering if this whole trading, tariffs, all this stuff is just some elaborate scheme to drop the market as hard as they can, and then start pumping easy money and use kind of like a stimulus that's a stable coin, or get stable coin providers to start flooding people's wallet. You get a private key with $600 on it, go spend it,
Well, but here's the thing. You can essentially, how companies used to, or an investor used to tender for a company, a hostile takeover? You can or we used to send pallets of cash to Iraq to get everybody on the dollar. So I see stablecoins as simply a way for the US to tender for the global population. You just put everybody on a stablecoin, and that's how you get everybody into the dollar market share. So if you're losing market share because of the BRICS, you use stablecoins to just attract as many people around the world back into the dollar channel. So I'm assuming that they have every reason to be very aggressive with stablecoin, and whatever they're doing I mean, the trade is deglobalizing, but that doesn't mean the dollar channel is deglobalizing at all. They're going to try and get as many people on the dollar as they can.
Right, but I meant as far as dollar strength's concerned, right? So you start getting everybody on the dollar, which makes it stronger, and then that's going to have a negative effect on just asset prices, right? So the stronger the dollar gets, the higher the DXY pumps, the harder it's going to be on asset prices. So I think they have a tool that allows them to print as much as they want, even more so. So if
Right.
they let all of the non G7 countries start using U.S. dollar stable coins as a medium of exchange, that allows them to print even more money than they
Right.
would if U.S. citizens were using it, and that's the trend that we're seeing. So, your original question about is this like an extension of that. I certainly think that's the case. And if you look at like the treasury market, it's been trading like a meme coin. The other thing is Mar-a-Lago Accord. They're talking about longer duration treasuries. So we have a 30-year bond that I think what they're trying to do is create super bonds, which are like 100+ year treasuries, and use those to back stable coins. So um, the Mar-a-Lago Accord is what Wall Street's kind of dubbing what Trump's trying to do. So I think that's another part of what what all this is and what they're trying to accomplish.
So between now and 2026, 60% of the treasuries outstanding rollover.
Yeah.
So you've brought the maturities in so short, you've got incredible rollover. So anything you can do to take the duration out longer, I'm sure they're going to want to do.
Yeah, and this is
Yeah.
something the IMF has talked about, the BIS, the super bond. I have. Are you familiar with super bonds? Have you?
So 100-year bonds used to be called consols. So I'm assuming you're talking about what used to be called consols. Right.
I mean that's what it seems like. What the trend we're headed in is just to have 300-year bonds and wrap them up and use as bonds. And
So
the
I don't know if
IMF.
you saw it. The Chinese are pumping, and who else is pumping? Somebody else is doing a big pump. Was it German? Oh, the Germans upped the debt limit, which is amazing, and the Chinese are coming out with huge bond issuance. So the liquidity, about to be a rush of liquidity. We'll see if it makes much of a difference, but
Yeah, if you look at charts of global net liquidity, we keep moving higher and higher. So that's also kind of what asset prices are especially risk assets, they kind of follow is net liquidity, and you're seeing China's central bank put a ton of currency into the market. So all
right.
over the all over the globe, you're seeing that. I found it funny. Did you happen to see the Tucker Carlson interview with Luke Gromen?
No, no.
They were speaking about the official stats of central banks that own gold, and China's like way down on the list, like number 20 or something
Uh-huh.
ridiculous. And it's like they said Italy is like the highest in gold holdings, and Italy's insolvent pretty much. So it's like the EU is bailing out Italy. How would they have the highest gold reserves? And if that's true, right? Like, then I guess we're in for some huge trouble ahead. But yeah, it's
So I don't we don't have a financial or economic problem, we have a governance problem. And here's the reality: if you look at the Western world, the way the leadership has provided for the quality of life is by plundering the world. And now that it can't plunder the world, it's going to plunder its own population. I mean, that's what's going on right now at the White House. We're watching, you know, Trump is becoming the P.T. Barnum of plunder capitalism. So, so, and I think the challenge for all of us is if the plunder games are turning back inward to the Western world, how are we going to deal with that? Now, if you look at the history of the Western world, we've been pumping and dumping, and the bankers have been sort of harvesting the economy. I'm just reading a book now written by a guy in 1890 about the London money power and how they're pumping and dumping the heartland. So this has been going on for a lot longer, but you're having to we're in the middle of a central banking reset that happens every 100 or so years. So that means big change, but this time it's coming with technology that gives them the ability to dramatically control in very invasive ways that have never been possible before. And our big danger here is that they are able on this reset to institute a slavery system. That's what the Internet of Bodies is all about. I literally just was reading a website of a new software developer who just did an IPO, and they have a whole website on the Internet of Forests. They're planning on digitizing all the forests. So tiny nanoparticle sensors over, all of life. And now you digitize the forest. And of course, what is that's step one to asset tokenization of all the forests. Right. Right. Right.
And it really, like, the carbon markets are completely different than tokenizing forests. So it would have to be because of the minerals. It would have to be because of a lot of other things. But um, like, water is supposed to be like, clean water is supposed to be like a new gold rush that's coming, and a lot of things that just nature offers are going to be scarce in the future. That's why Bill Gates is loading up on farmland. How are we with time, Catherine? You said that you had a prior
Uh,
engagement. I want to keep you if you have to do something.
yeah. So I'm good for another 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Gates was was loading up on farmland. Rick Rules talked about clean water, and then tokenizing forest, wildlife. Right, it all kind of fits into a grander
Right.
plan. And really, everybody has the lens of financial applications with blockchain, but really, this is much it's bringing depth to the internet that we already have. So it's going to be able to give you granular detail on the internet that we have, give you accessibility, that is will change how the internet functions and kind of restructure it, like the governance that you're talking about. Like, the internet's going
So
to be able to have governance as well.
so the way I see it is I see a two-tier system where the insiders enjoy open databases and the general population is on a blockchain. And it's literally a way of, it's really a tool to control.
Yeah, well, it certainly can be, and it looks like it's headed that way in the direction. It doesn't have to be that way, but yes, it looks like that's where we're headed.
Right. Well, that's why the question is, always how, it's like judo. The force is coming at you. How do you convert it in a way that sends it in a wholly different direction? So how do you use the technology to head in the direction of freedom? That's the question.
It comes down to public awareness, right? Like, if we bartered and moved away from their system and created our own system of what we had value, what we have for value, right? Like, and you transact with currencies that are backed with assets that the people value and that are redeemable for the underlying. I think that could potentially be a way to, you know, change the trajectory of this, like, centralized glob that's.
Okay, so what that means is you have living systems. So let's take a county in America. You have living systems, which is the people, the plants, the animals, the water, the ecology. So you have living systems, and then you have, financial systems, whether it's crypto or dollars or, the stock market, whatever. And they are both happening in a place. And it's interesting in my life, I go back and forth between people who talk on the financial side of the balance sheet and then people who talk on the living side of the balance sheet. And it seems to me they need to get together. So, for years, what I've always said whenever I'm talking with people who love crypto or love Bitcoin, why aren't you why aren't you down at the farmers market figuring out how to use this for local currency? To get people transacting more locally and circulating more money locally. And I've never been able to get the two crowds in it, to get interested in each other.
I have a friend that's trying to do exactly what you're describing. He's a big fan of yours. I'll put you in touch with them.
Okay.
Is CFCEE. They're trying to create designs where, just what you were saying, where real value gets backed, and they're actually trying to propose it to smaller central banks. So, we back currency with hours of labor, or carbon credits, whatever you would find valuable.
Right.
Um, that
Well, part of it is you want to. a really healthy system that can create the most wealth has a balance between digital and analog, where they're giving each other energy, and um, the analog gives it integrity, but it also makes it impossible to control centrally. So you can get the benefits of digital and you can get the benefits of analog, and you do it in a way where they help each other. That's what you want.
You need some
So
type of anchor, right? There needs to be an anchor that ties one to the other, so it's not just like fiat, for example. The debt system has benefits to it, right? Because prior to the debt system, the gold standard promoted scarcity, right? If one country exported all of their gold, they would have to start producing more to bring the gold back. But sooner or later, people started wars, right? You look at violence, wars historically. We're actually at the most peaceful time in history. I don't know if that,
right.
it doesn't feel like that, but the reason why is because there's debt and there's people being able to get stuff now that they otherwise would have needed later, that
Right.
they would have had a delay.
So just remember, there's a difference between a debt-based currency and fiat. You can have a fiat currency without debt basing. So the problem with the dollar is not that it's fiat. The problem with the dollar is it's debt-based. And in fact, if you go back and you look throughout history, the most successful currencies have been fiat. They just haven't been debt-based. And the problem with fiat is you have to have great governance. If you combine fiat with terrible governance, you get dollars or Bitcoin, as what, now the problem with the dollar is it's debt based. But go back, the great currencies of history are fiat. There's nothing wrong with fiat. It just has to be governed well. And governing things well is harder than it sounds.
Well, that's where this technology could really help out, right? Is the governance problem is that's a lot of the protocols that you see, they have sophisticated governance models where people right now are controlling billions of dollars of wealth and making sure that it's fair for everyone.
Right. But here's the thing with governance. To come up with a good governance system, you have to understand how control works. And control works one person at a time. And if you look at how control works, you have to understand. We're just about to publish a book this year. We did a 12-part series called Deep State Tactics, and it's on all the portfolio of dirty tricks that I've ever dealt with or observed in my life, which is a tremendous amount. You really have to understand how control works, including covert operations and invisible weaponry and mind control, to be able to put together a good governance system. And it's very rare that I meet anybody who's really studied how governance works. And usually, when I get in a debate on financial systems, like I say, no, the dollar's not going to collapse, or Bitcoin is easily manipulated, it's not because I understand the financial aspects of the system. It's because I understand how they control. And so if any of us are going to ever talk about or put together a good governance system, we have to get much smarter about how control works and the dirty tricks we're up against. Yeah. And that's an education anybody can get. But what I've discovered is most people don't want it because it's too the hardest thing in my life I ever had to do was look in the mirror and say I'm the patsy. I was assistant secretary of housing and all this mortgage fraud was going on, and I really didn't understand it and how it was working while it was right in front of my face. I'm the patsy. And I only did that because it was a necessary step to survival. But most people don't want to look at it. Most people do not want to look in the mirror and realize that they've been part of poisoning their children, whether it's with big pharma or bad food or whatever. That's it's hard. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just my realization to invest in assets outside of the system, you have to realize that you've been taken advantage of this entire time. You've been the sucker.
Right. 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 All of us have. We've all been the patsy. And we all had, people we loved persuade us of things that weren't true because they didn't know better. So it's hard to look in that mirror. So, but we're all going to have to do it before this is over. So
When
you
I
might as
first
well laugh about it.
when I first introduced my father to Bitcoin, he always used to say the reason the dollar has value is because the government backs it. What backs Bitcoin? And it's like, just get it out of your head. Get that out of your head. They're not doing any favors for you. And finally, he came around to it, but you know,
So I got to tell you, Bitcoin's totally a Ponzi scheme. It is a Ponzi scheme, and its value depends on where the people pumping the Ponzi scheme want to take it. And as Larry Fink said, if they want to take it to 700,000, they can. But when they do that, that's how they're going to strip out the remaining assets of the United States government, a lot of other governments. It's going to
Mike,
depend on a rape of the taxpayer.
yeah, Michael Saylor's pyramid scheme, right? It just keeps issuing more and more bonds to buy Bitcoin. It really depends on who buys the next bond issuance of MicroStrategy.
Right.
You set it up, it's exactly like a pyramid scheme. And I think it ends in disaster right as the government makes a strategic.
Well, it's going to end in disaster. The question is, who's the last investor in the Ponzi scheme? That who's going to eat the disaster? Well, I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to No, they won't get bailed out because now you're talking about they will swap it for the land. They will take the land, and so you're gonna take $500 trillion of priceless resources, and you're gonna make Rockefeller kind of fortunes for a lot of private insiders. That's what it's going to be. Then we end up like Russia with lots of horrible oligarchs. It's it's going to be very anyway. So I intend to do everything I can to stop it. But here's the thing, and I don't mean to brag, but if you let me engineer state and local, give a lot of political contributions and engineer state and local, purchases of silly putty, I could run the silly putty price up to 700,000 too. It's a no-brainer. Anyway, so if you have a Bitcoin position, essentially you're involved in a political speculation, and you've got to, it's not an economic phenomenon. You've got to track the politics of it, and for God's sakes, get your principal out before the game's up.
Yeah, it's very eerie. On that note, how do we find you, Catherine?
Okay, I'm at Solari.com. We have a great paper called Bitcoin Bailout about all of the Bitcoin if you're interested in. But we have a wonderful paper we wrote called What the States Can Do Building the Legal and Financial Infrastructure for Financial Freedom. And there's a huge amount the states can do. We also have a paper, if you've never worked with your state legislature, we have a document on how to get to know your state legislators and work with them. And we're watching citizen lobbyists all over the country, get into the state legislature and get real change made. So there's a tremendous amount you can do for financial freedom, whether it's rolling back the digital ID or rolling back an all digital monetary system, and if you love crypto, that's great, but you better love cash too, because the only way we can keep from going to, a social credit system that controls all the financial transactions is by one of the ways we can do it is by keeping cash alive. So keep your cash stockpile too.
It's true privacy. Most people underestimate the value of privacy, and I think that's another thing that you're slowly uh, having the public awaken to.
Right. So I litigated with the Department of Justice for 11 years and had 24/7 physical harassment and surveillance. And I learned a lot about the value of privacy.
Well, that was your argument with Doge too. It's like, what's the value of what they're looking at and everything.
Oh, the value of that data is priceless.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
Musk is saying he's going to try to put Treasury on a blockchain, right? So you could track everything for the corrupt politicians embezzling money. Yeah.
Well, he's also out, according to public reports, he's out in the market raising capital for XAI. So, and for SpaceX and for X. And if you look at all the things he's doing through Doge, I'm sure that's had a very dramatic improvement on the market cap of those companies. If you look at some of his partners on those companies who are publicly traded, their market cap has been flying since Doge started playing the data game, and I suspect there's a connection.
Well, also Starlink, right? When we're talking about leveraging all tokenized natural resources, right now Africa really doesn't have internet, but it's got $30 trillion in precious minerals and precious everything.
Right,
So I think that's another frontier that they're exploring as well.
right, right.
I'm going to let you go. I know you have other things that you have to do, but it was a pleasure, Catherine. Thank.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I still want to spend some time deep diving Tether because I have so many allies who keep saying Tether's a scam, but I've never due diligence Tether, and I want to learn a lot more about it. I know you know a lot more about it than I do. So
Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. If you enjoy content like this, please consider joining my Patreon.